Good evening, everybody. We're now broadcasting. It's Thursday, the 23rd of October 2025, and this is a special meeting of the Environment Select Committee of the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea to consider flooding matters. My name is Greg Hammond. I'm the Councillor for Caulfield Ward and Chair of the committee. As we've got many members of the public here tonight, thank you all for coming. We'll do some introductions in a moment, but first of all, at the start of all of our meetings, all of our formal meetings, we do pause to remember those of our friends and neighbours who died in the Grenfell tragedy in June 2017 with 72 seconds of silence. Thank you, Chair. Thanks very much indeed. We've had apologies for absence from Councillor Mackover. I will ask the committee members to introduce themselves in turn and also let us know if they've got any declarations of interest. So from my left.
No declarations of interest. My name is Paul Idris. I'm a member of the committee and councillor for Brompton and Hansdown.
I'm Doris Schmetterling, councillor in Pembridge Ward, just north of Nottingham Gate. Member of the committee. And no interest to declare.
Hi, I'm Councillor Laura Burns from Chelsea Riverside Ward. No declarations.
Hi everyone, Councillor Tim Verbruggen and from the Oscorp Ward, also no declarations.
Councillor Mobatia, representing Colvin.
Thanks very much indeed.
Nothing to declare.
I've got those declarations as well. Assisting the committee tonight to my right.
I'm James Diamond. I'm Scrutiny Policy Officer supporting the committee.
And further on.
And I'm Tommy Hammer and I'm the Governance Officer also support the committee.
Right at the door, assisting the committee.
I'm Jackie Hurd. I'm the Scrutiny Manager.
Thanks very much indeed. I will invite our guests to introduce themselves in a moment, but the next thing I've got is the minutes of the previous meeting. Are the committee members content with I signing the previous minutes?
I've got one query. The officer's going to assist me in my memory. On page 5, paragraph 8, just talking about the leaflets that are in the recycling bags. I thought maybe I'd remark on the fact we could have had a bit more information on them, try and clarify one or two more items.
Are you content that we sign them with that caveat marked in the minutes of this meeting?
Yeah,
sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so the minutes are agreed. Thank you very much indeed. So welcome to our guests from Thames Water and Council, the lead member and council officers who deal with flooding. So I'll start to my right for introductions down the table. So John first.
I'm Jonathan Wade. I'm Head of Spatial Planning.
James Latham, I'm Principal Flood and Water Management Officer at Council.
I'm Johnny Palasitas. I'm the lead member with responsibility for flooding.
Excellent.
I'm Ian Ruffle. I'm Head of Asset Planning for Waste in London at Thames Water.
I'm Alex Sixon, Head of Environmental Compliance and Partnerships at Thames Water.
I'm James Abbott, and I'm the Local Government Liaison at Thames Water.
Thanks very much indeed. So you're all very welcome. So what we'll do in a moment, I'll invite both the Council and Thames Water to introduce your papers. And then I'm sure the committee will have questions for you. And then when we've been through those, I'll invite councillors who have not members of the committee, I think there's a couple in the audience, to ask their questions. And then I'll invite members of the public to ask questions after that. And I will try and project our voices because I can see we've got a few people struggling to hear from way over there in the distance. So without further ado then, perhaps if Councillor Thalassidis as the lead member, if you'd like to introduce the paper and then your officers can assist you further.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think just that John and James kind of had the detail. I think from our perspective, all I would say is that we know flooding is a major problem in Kensington and Chelsea. For all of the people affected a few years ago, it's still something that has had a huge impact on their lives. And so it's incumbent on us as a local authority to do everything in our power to increase the flood resilience of the borough. And also to work with Thames Water and press them where we can to try and make sure that steps are taken to mitigate future risk, because we know that these events have that impact and we know that they're becoming more common. Do you want to talk a bit more about the specifics?
Yeah, I'll run through briefly what's in the paper. So the main.
Sorry, James, can you speak up? Your voice is projecting this way and it's on ear, so well at the back.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Just yell a bit more, that's all.
Yeah, okay. So the council has a strategy for managing flood risk, and the last one was adopted 18 months ago. So the main purpose of this paper is to look at the progress made against the strategy, the actions within the strategy, and see what steps need to be taken, see if anything needs to change. Invite members of the committee to review what's happened within the last 18 months and look at progress. So overall, the strategy is within 4 themes. So there's flood resilient communities, that's focusing on the people, on the residents, on those that impacted most by flooding. So there are lots of actions that have either been completed. So we published guidance for residents for the steps they can take themselves to protect their properties from flooding. Or there's actions around community resilience. So we've undertaken workshops. We've also supported the development of a flood action group within the borough, which is supported by the National Flood Forum and really brings together members of the community to work on flooding. The second theme is adapted places. That's about changing the landscape to make it work better with water, the rainfall that we're expected. So installing sustainable drainage wherever we can in our infrastructure, working with the planning system to make sure that there is adequate planning policies in place. So in the last 18 months, the new local plan has been adopted. So that strengthened policies in flood risk management and drainage. We're also working in collaboration with Thames Water on certain projects in terms of funding the delivery of those interventions, and also we can't only focus on surface water flooding and sewer flooding. There's also a risk of tidal flooding along the southern boundary of the borough. So we're working on developing a riverside strategy, which fits into wider regional strategies to make sure that the flood defences along the River Thames are increased. The third theme is around working together, so making sure that we're in partnership with both internally between services, but also externally with other partners across London, because we're aware that we can't focus on flood risk management just in RBKC. We have to work across other boroughs, work with other boroughs on delivering interventions that will benefit our residents ultimately. The fourth theme is around monitoring and review, and this almost forms part of that monitoring and review, making sure that we are looking at the actions, looking at the objectives, looking at the evidence that we have around flood risk, making sure that we have everything that we need. There's lots of work that we've done on that and lots more work to do. So there's lots more detail, and we can get into the detail with questions from the committee. That's overall the structure of the paper.
Thanks very much, James. John, do you wish to add anything?
No, I think Travis has covered that very well.
Thank you very much. So, Thames Water, who'd like to speak? You can all speak, or one of you, or
Yeah, so I'll give the update. I'll go through some of the work we've done to date to flooding, but also some of the short and medium and longer term actions as well. And it talks very much on some of the points you raised, particularly around partnership working and collaboration. these some really sort of complex challenges we're facing into, and it's by working together that we can make the best improvements. So in terms of what we've done to date, there's been significant investment in protecting properties from sewer flooding. So this largely involves installing non-return valves to prevent sewage going the wrong way, but also what we call flips as well, which are small pumping stations, which allows us to pump into the sewer if the property has a lower point in the sewer. So we contacted about 700 properties in the boroughs to understand the vulnerabilities and the risks. We did a risk-based assessment about what was feasible, what was deliverable, and have installed solutions at about 500 properties to protect them from sewer flooding, some of which have been incredibly successful when there have been heavy downpours. You mentioned about the importance of SUDS as well, and we really sort of see this as the future across the city and the borough. It's so important that we can come up with solutions that allow water to drain into the ground rather than running off the surface. There isn't a feasible sewer system that can adequately deal with some of the future pressures of extreme rainfall and development. So SUDS is so fundamental to the future investment, which is why we've supported with the work at Allen & Barlow Estate. We've co-funded the opportunity modelling as well for SUDS, and we've also supported the Portobello Road Action Group. So that's what we've done. In terms of some of the short-term actions coming, we're increasing the installation of monitors in the sewers, which helps us see where the blockages are occurring, which can cause pollutions and potentially flooding issues as well, so that we can react to them more quickly. We've also massively increased the numbers of tankers and teams that go and clean the sewers to get rid of the blockers, so they're more free-flowing as well. And we're looking to fund more SUDS opportunities across London. So doing this through a scheme where local groups can apply for co-funding opportunities, of which I believe the borough has submitted a couple of applications, and there'll be subsequent submissions going forward as well. We also, in the medium term, we have Lotts Road Pumping Station. So this is a sewage pumping station with relatively old pumps that are operated manually because they're very old and because they need diesel engines to operate them. And this pumping station is being upgraded with new pumps, and it's being electrified so it can have automated control. And this will allow the sewer system to be more resilient, and it allows that pumping station to be more reliable as well going forward. We've also been commissioning the Thames Tideway Tunnel. So this has been in operation since last August, and it's collected about 10 million metres cubed of sewage so far, and then allowed it to be treated at Beckton in East London. And this is really key because it means we're less affected by tidal factors that you mentioned, James. We don't get the same tide locking effect, and we can cleanse the sewers more effectively as well. And so I just put the volume into perspective, 10 million metres cubed. I think that equates to about 4,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools. So a massive environmental benefit as well. We've also got the new cycle of drainage and wastewater management plans as well. So our regulator, one of our regulators, DEFRA, has a statutory obligation for us to have long-term plans for what we're doing with environmental performance and flooding as well. And this is a new iteration of the drainage and wastewater management plans that will go up until 2055. And a really key theme of that is about how we collaborate with local boroughs, the Environment Agency, flood groups, local customers and residents to make sure we've got a really joined up understanding where the risks and issues are, and we can invest in the best way possible going forward. So that's something that will be a build in the existing drainage and wastewater management plans as well. The final thing to mention just on the SUDS is that we've also got an innovation scheme where we've launched with funding from our regulator, Ofwat, to work with utilities so that we can, when utilities dig up the road or part of the area, rather than putting back a material that's impenetrable to water, so it's going to cause more runoff, we can install a SUDS-based solution instead. So this innovation scheme is looking at how that would work, and also the sort of design principles that are in place as well. So that's a really sort of exciting opportunity to install a large volume of SUDS going forward. But I don't know, Alex or James, is there anything to add or I've missed it or to pull out?
I think I was pretty comprehensive. The only thing I would add is we're founding members of something called Flood Ready London. So it's a partnership that brings together all the boroughs, the EA, GLA, TfL, ourselves and London Fire Brigade to try and solve surface water flooding at a catchment scale, because we recognise that sometimes you need to look at solutions at the top of the catchment to protect the bottom of the catchment. And we've subdivided London into 10 catchments, and 2 of those catchments, of which this borough is part of one of them, are priority catchments for action. And we've contributed to a fund of £3 million to enable those catchments to start looking at strategic actions to address flood risk. So it's not all about plans, there's stuff happening as well.
James, did you want to add anything?
No, no.
Okay, thank you. Just to situate us before I go to the committee, James Latham, you helpfully put in paragraph 3.2 and 3.3 Hall there a little bit about the demarcation between where the responsibilities of the council stop and the responsibilities of the Thames Water start. I think it might be worth highlighting that orally for both perspectives, just so we understand who's responsible for what. I know some of us probably know that anyway, but I think it's really helpful to get that on the table orally.
And it can be really complicated because it may be the same rainfall event may flood properties in different ways, and almost the way in which it floods the properties, the responsibility may be between different organisations as well. So the council has responsibilities under the Flood and Water Management Act for surface water flooding, so local sources of flooding, so surface water, groundwater, and ordinary watercourse. So surface water is defined as basically rain falling on the ground surface, and before it gets into the sewer network or watercourse. If it flows over land, then that's defined as surface water flooding. Sewer flooding is where water comes through hydraulically through the sewer network and into properties through toilet connections, shower trays, and potentially external drainage as well. So there is demarcation between responsibilities, but particularly for significant rainfall events, it can be very difficult to almost unpick that, which is partly why collaboration is important, but also understanding that one can't be solved without the other is also really important.
Thank you. Let's see if Thames Water wants to add anything to that. Ian, did you want to?
I think it's really good summary. Yeah, so our sort of a lot of our focus and funding is on the sewer flooding, but you're absolutely right. It's about how do we understand these challenges collectively and then solve them collectively, and that goes across councils, the Environment Agency, charities, local residents. It's really important that we can get to that point where we can share the data that we have and bring funding together to be able to solve these problems because they're so interconnected and complex.
Thanks very much. So I'm going to turn to the committee. I'm going to go to the far end. Mo caught my eye first, so go ahead.
Thank you very much. The report is very good and the explanation is even better. And we don't know how good the measures you have taken until we have another flood. We have had a flood almost 5 years ago and damaged tens of properties in North Kensington. Can you tell me out of 10 how effective the measures you've taken so far?
So since those floods, since that flood, we've installed about 250 property protection devices, the ones I talked about with the non-return valves. We've also done some SUDs as well, a couple of properties, and also the blip pumps as well. So we look at the effectiveness of those often through modelling, and as you say though, we don't know for certain, but what we know from previous incidents, I think it was back in 2016, we installed a similar number of assets, the flips and the non-return valves. And when we had a subsequent flood, they were found to be incredibly effective, and so effective, in fact, that it actually led to the cancellation of the Countess Creek tunnel works. So they were so effective at preventing flooding, it led to that change.
So can you tell the chances of having another flood like we had 3 years ago is 50% less or more?
It's very difficult to put an exact number on it because it can depend on the intensity of the storm event. So as part of our drainage and wastewater management plans, what we do is we risk assess certain areas and then understand what investment needs to go into those areas. But we don't know until we can't say for certain. We can model these rainfall events, but it's a very complex job to model them and give accuracy, particularly when it's at a very specific property level.
So installing, I may, installing the individual pumps at houses, it certainly fixes the problem at a certain house, but diverts the problem for somebody else to deal with. Do you think this is a solution?
I think it's part of the solution. I think that's why we need to keep building on the work that's been done, particularly with the SUDS work of collaboration, the modelling, the work through the drainage management plan, and the upgrades of things like Lots Road as well. So I think the sort of real concern is that with further development and also more extreme rainfall events, the need for SUDS in particular is going to be really key. But it's certainly not. This is a step forward, but we need to kind of keep doing these interventions and more going forward.
Is the best course of action is building extra storages, or whatever you call them, to store the water, rainwater immediately? Is the best course of action?
What we found, so we did off the previous flooding incident, there was a report that Ofwat required us to do the Countess Creek one, and we had that independently assessed, and their assessment was that a conventional sewer system can't feasibly handle excessive rainfall events. The amount of water, it physically, we can't build sewers big enough that could handle certain events. So there won't ever be or through sewers alone, there won't be a situation where we can prevent every eventuality. And storage can only go so far. It might buy a small amount of time, but with an extreme rainfall event like the one we saw in 2021, for instance, it simply inundates the area.
Thank you.
So, a few questions. This one is for the council, sorry. In 5.9, you mentioned the form of flood investigation on the July 2021 flood.
Sorry, can you speak up? You can't hear.
I'm sorry, I'm very soft spoken. I'll do my best. So the council published a form of flood investigation following the flooding of July 2021, but it seems it had to do extra work afterwards for properties that were missed out in the original analysis. What was missing from what made the analysis miss those properties, and what lessons could be learned to prevent that from happening in the future? Because I imagine that those people might have been going.
Yeah, I think initially quite a few residents were wary of reporting flooding, partly for insurance purposes. They maybe told their insurer, or maybe didn't tell their insurer, and dealt with it themselves. I think there's a concern that in reporting it to Thames Water, reporting it to the council, formally I flooded, XYZ needed to move out of my property. There's a fear that it would impact their insurance going forward. So one part of that cohort is probably the initial underreporting, who were then, through the work of the Flood Action Group, through the work of more engagement with the council, they then came forward to report the fact that they did flood in July 2021. Another part of it is some properties that are managed by, say, housing associations. Clusters of properties managed by housing associations were affected by flooding. Some of the residents needed to move out to the properties. We had overall numbers of those properties through our housing management service, but we didn't have the individual breakdown of addresses until after the report had been published. So part of it is, the consolidation of that as well. I mean, it was only a year after the flooding, the flood investigation report was published, which feels like a long time for the residents who were affected a year ago, but also is quite a short amount of time with the magnitude of flooding that we had to be able to go into areas and fully understand what's going on. So we're planning to publish an addendum to the flood investigation to almost correct and say this is what we now know to be the whole number of properties. I suppose one other thing that some residents reported is that they may have told the MP at the time, or they may have reported to individual councillors, but that wasn't captured necessarily in a way, or they may have told community representatives, and it's just about making sure there's a consistent way of collecting that information. So what we now have on the website is a form the residents can fill in, and that can be shared. That's there all the time. So it's a way of capturing that information immediately as soon as something happens in a consistent way. So we'll immediately have that information. We didn't have that available when the last flooding occurred, so it then took time and different routes and different ways of getting it across. So I think we're in a better position now, and I think we've learned from what happened in the investigation. I think there will still be the need to investigate and report reasonably promptly, and I think we've in the strategy we said about a year maximum to have that report. But in that, it's acknowledging the fact that it may be underreporting and may need to be corrected.
And you mentioned social housing providers. You mentioned social housing providers. Is there anything that you'll be doing in the future then as well with floodings to reach out to them to ensure that those properties are also captured instead of depending on the individual people to report it?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so our housing management service works closely in collecting the overall numbers with the social housing providers, but then it's the next level of the individual properties that were affected and making sure that, because what we didn't want to do is those residents had reported themselves as well as reporting directly to the housing providers. So we have good links with the social housing providers in the areas that are most vulnerable to flooding within the borough, particularly. So it'll be quicker to do that.
And the addendum report is expected to be published this autumn.
Yes.
Is there something that we can do as the environment committee on that, or just have insight on that? What do you think? That's actually more a question for the chair later on, probably.
Maybe later on.
Yeah.
But unless you want to comment.
Then the other question I had was on the Riverside strategy, flooding on the River Thames. I imagine that, as you mentioned, you were working with other boroughs on that, because if we're doing our bit on Chelsea, if Hammersmith and Fulham and Westminster are behind and there's flooding happening, Chelsea will still be flooded.
Yes.
So how is that cooperation going? Are you working with the GLA on that as well?
Yeah, so I attend what's called a Thames Tidal Councils Forum. So it's all councils along the tidal River Thames. So part of that is it's a quarterly forum working through individual sections. There are other strategies going on. They're being updated at the same time. So there's the Quay to Chelsea strategy, which partly looks at flood risk, but also looks at other aspects like amenity, biodiversity, and the kind of the use of the riverside, making sure that communities are connected to the river. There's a overall plan. So the Environment Agency in the Flood and Water Management Act have the responsibility for tidal and main river flooding. So they have a plan themselves, which is the Thames Estuary 2100 plan, and so they almost set the threshold at which we need to make sure the flood defences are raised to. And then our Riverside strategy is basically looking at all of those assets, identifying who owns them, what level they're currently set at, when they may need to be raised, and indicate how that raising may happen. Some of this raising of the defences isn't needed until maybe between 2050 and 2070. So it's longer term planning.
Yeah.
But at least at the moment, all we're doing is identifying what needs to happen when, so that it can be factored into future pricing in the future or budgets. What we made clear is individually, it would be very difficult for councils to fund the raising of the assets that we have within existing budgets without something, because that's going to happen individually across the whole of the River Thames. So, but at the moment it's evidence gathering, and it includes, as you said, the interactions with other boroughs. So we all are just making sure that we are being consistent with the overall plan for the River Thames, and putting our piece in.
And then last question, sorry. When we're looking at the super sewage that is in operation last year, obviously that runs across the river, so the southern border of the borough. Are there long-term infrastructure questions for the borough itself leading to the tunnel? Because I imagine that is even some tunnels might be Victorian on that front. You already mentioned that the current infrastructure can't handle extreme rainfall currently. With future pressures, increasing in population, etc., what is that pressure going to look like, let's say, in 2 decades' time?
So that's through the drainage and wastewater management plans. That includes a consideration about what it means in terms of future weather events, but also growth as well. And then what we then have to do to our assets, and we have to do the things like sustainable drainage and what investment we need to be able to address that. So that will need a number of grey solutions like pouring concrete, but also the sort of green solutions that we talked about earlier. But the next iteration of the drainage and wastewater management plans will be able to go into a lot more specificity than the current ones up to 2055. It'll be very regionally, be very locally specific.
Thanks, Laura.
Thank you, Chair. I have a few questions. One, really, this might be the easiest question of the night. How often do you clean and maintain like the sewers?
Yeah.
And when you do you very often identify issues or problems just generally?
Yeah, we've identified a huge number of issues, particularly things that are put down the drains and toilets that shouldn't be, particularly with fat soil and greases, particularly from takeaways. We see a lot of those as well. So that misuse of sewers causes huge problems with blockages. It causes pollutions, but also it can contribute to flooding as well. So in terms of how we deal with that, we use anchoring teams that go out and they'll jet the lines, they'll jet the sewers, they do inspections. We do CCTV surveys as well. And we do that using blockage hotspots. So we know the areas that are more prone to blockages, and we target cleaning proactively in those areas. So part of it's about proactively going out, hitting those areas we know to be problematic. But then also we react to issues as they come up as well. And by installing the sewer depth monitors or installing more of them, we can get an alarm essentially that sees if the sewer is going up, the level of the sewer is going up when it shouldn't be, and we can get teams out quicker. And over the next 5 years, we're installing tens of thousands more of these meters and have a better control system to target with the cleaning.
Sorry, how often do you?
Oh, every day.
Yeah. Every day.
Yeah, we're constantly out there. Yeah.
Sorry, if I could just add to that. I mean, the frequency of cleaning depends upon the sewer and our assessment of its sort of condition, etc. So as Ian was saying, they vary in frequency of cleaning. So essentially sewers, when designed, were designed to be self-cleaning. The very shape of them is designed to clear the blockages. So unfortunately, with our increasingly fatty diets and sort of proclivity to flush things down the loo that shouldn't ever go down the loo, we get fat bursts and so on. So that means that some sewers need cleaning more frequently than others. And as James was saying, we've got known problem sewers. So sewers where there's near high concentrations of fast food establishments, sewers where they've got a fairly gentle gradient where things can settle out and block more easily, or sewers that we just know are of a certain age, not necessarily older sewers, but they need more regular attention, and they are regularly cleaned, some of them quarterly, some of them monthly. Other sewers, where we put these sewer depth alarms in, we are monitoring to see, do they need cleaning more frequently? And if we see a water level higher than what we would expect under the normal circumstances, that will then lead us to quickly send out a cleaning team. Also, we do get responses from customers. We get about 68,000 calls a year from our customers, and that's where they started to see a problem in the sewer. Maybe their toilet isn't flushing away quickly, or they can notice there's a smell. And that's another signal for us to get out and clear those blockages. But what we're trying to do is get ahead of the blockage before it happens and before it causes a problem.
James had something to add before we go back to Laura. Laura, next question.
Yeah, I just wanted to add about the sewer depth monitors and the monitoring. I think it's useful for the community to be aware that I have raised concerns in the past around the number of sewer depth monitors that are currently involved, particularly in the trunk sewers. There were a number that we used as part of the London flood review, which was the kind of London-wide review of the flood in July 2021. But those were bespoke for the Thames Tideway Tunnel, and they've been removed. So, as far as I'm aware, we are in a less good position than we were in July 2021 in terms of the evidence that we have, the number of sewer depth monitors that that we have in the borough, particularly in certain locations. That's from the information that I've been passed from Thames Water, and I think what would be really useful, and it's kind of one of the actions is understanding where the new sewer depth monitors are proposed to be installed within the borough, to then be able to have confidence in how the sewers are functioning currently.
Yeah, no problem. At the risk of hijacking Laura's question, and we'll come back to you, Laura. This is MR6 on page 26 of the main paper, which is showing as red on the bank rating. So, yes, we would be very interested to know what Thames Water they're doing.
Yeah, we can absolutely get back to you on that for other specific details. I'll have to double check, but it might be that there are several different types of sewer monitors, and there were some we had installed the Tideway for safety reasons, and so that where we had people operating there, you have to make sure that there's precautions that we can get people out of sewers when it rains. So I'll have to double check which type they were, but yeah, we'll get back to you in the full details. Yeah.
Thank you. So we'll put that as an action. Laura, go over to you.
So that kind of leads me on to my next question. How often do all the different entities liaise, and how detailed is it? Because, you know, maybe you're doing some work or adding something, do you tell everyone straight away, or is there like a website or a page that is updated as works are done, as something is happening, so everyone can be abreast of what is, you know, working, not working, needs attention? Like, is it live? Tell me, someone, maybe, all of you.
So between the council and Thames Water, we have overall like quarterly meetings to talk about a range of issues, and so it can be things that are happening at the moment, projects that are planned, on the kind of individual when kind of specific works are planned. I get monthly updates from the sewer resilience programme with the number of properties that are being protected, and we also the council liaises with Thames Water as part of the London-wide programme. So probably in the different areas there are different frequencies at which we kind of interact as wider organisations.
And then for just sort of follow up for that, if, for example, there is responsibility from many different agencies, not just, you know, council, but perhaps Thames Water or whatever, how do you marry that together? How do you make that work? Say there's like a row of houses on one street and they've got an issue. How do you make that work in the easiest terms for the residents?
Yeah, so I mean, so one thing is reporting. So initially, reporting the flooding incidents, we now have a data sharing agreement between the council and Thames Water. So if a resident reports flooding to the council, we can share that information with Thames Water if the resident wants that information to be shared. But also we do have, there are examples where we've had site visits to joint site visits to specific areas to talk about how flood risk is managed in certain areas. So occasions like that do happen, and we coordinate on those matters.
It'd be kind of cool if I don't know how doable this is, but when works are done or new gizmos are added, not technical term, everybody, but you know what I mean. If they're added to something, so people, the public can see it, and also so we can see it. So if, you know, as and when things are done or amended, it would be nice to be able to see that somehow, somewhere, someone, just if we could note that, that'd be good. I do have a couple more questions, but one really, with densification. For example, at the moment, there's like in Chelsea Riverside, we have houseboats. A lot of them are trying to be bigger and have more people living there, and also it just costs, it causes more densification. Not just that, also Locks Road, new developments. So how do you future-proof those? Like, because obviously when you go to planning and stuff, you give your input, but how can you actually make it so it's not going to have a detrimental effect to residents, existing residents?
I think part of that comes through some of the planning commission. So, you know, Wales is a really good example of this, where they have very precise regulations in terms of approving new developments and the requirement for sustainable drainage. I think as well as some of the work that we do is the GLA and the local boroughs as well, is around how we understand where the kind of best areas for development are, both in terms of where we could mitigate the impacts and also where it would be more appropriate as well. So I think there's that collaboration about looking at things like the master plans and the local plans to figure out where the best areas for future development are as well.
Can I add on that? So unfortunately, we can only say yes to development. It's very difficult for us to say no. What we try and do is liaise with developers to say, how do you minimise your impact of your development on your neighbourhood? We're lucky in the London plan, the spatial development strategy for London has some very progressive policies on sustainable drainage and looks at terms like greenfield runoff rate. So, you know, a new development should not run any more surface water off it than the greenfield should. And those policies have been pretty good in driving large new developments to become more sustainably drained, have stormwater tanks, even some have rainwater harvesting systems. So generally, if we get a planning application in, we will look at that, we will comment on it, and we can pass advice back to the local planning authority about whether we think it is, you know, harmful to our system. But generally, if we have to accept it, very rarely we can apply what's called a Grampian measure. So we can say, we don't think that this building should be occupied until we've been able to make upgrades to our system to allow for its, to mitigate for its impact. But obviously delivering those in London is quite complex, which is why we generally try and work with the developer to make sure that so it happens. But we have applied them in the past, and we unfortunately are having to apply them more and more frequently as things go along. But, you know, generally we try and work with the local planning authority to make sure that the impact of those new developments are less. Now, quite often, new developments are much more water efficient than the development they replaced. So even though they may be bigger or denser, effectively the net impact isn't significant, particularly if they are managing their surface water runoff well, because the sort of rule of thumb we use is that a normal sized patio in a thunderstorm produces as much wastewater as 100 homes. So if you can reduce the stormwater runoff from something and make it more permeable, you can actually reduce the pressure on the sewers.
Very much, Story.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I've got basically three questions. And the first one is sort of fairly straightforward, I think, is about the new pumps on Locks Road. Will they also increase capacity?
I don't think so. I think the drive for the project's more about resilience. So the current ones need a person to physically turn on the pumps in quite a complicated way. And they'd actually base themselves at the site 24/7 so that they can respond when we get a downpour of rain. But I don't think the capacity will be noticeably different because of the spatial restrictions of getting the pumps in and how they then connect to the sewer. Because it's a listed building, but also you need to size the pumps for the sewer, otherwise it causes problems with habitations which damage the pump. So it's more about resilience, so being confident they're going to work when needed rather than having capacity. But having said that, the Thames Tideway tunnel that they pump into means that there is more capacity now, and on occasions when there's high tides, it means we can get the sewage out of the sewers better.
Thanks. Well, that actually leads me quite nicely to the next point, which is the big one, like to me anyway, is that the Thames Barrier was opened in 1982. And I understand that the year it opened, it already had more closures than expected. And it's been rising ever since. So where are we with that? Because at some stage, it's not going to be enough.
That's right, yeah. So
All of central London, including Chelsea. But can I just add something for those not so old as I am? I remember, because I used to live up the road from the town hall, there was a sign up, a poster up, which showed you the expected flood levels. That's before the Thames Barrier. And there was a poster at the level of the town hall, just below the Observatory Garden. It's halfway up the town hall. And that would be the flood level. 2 million people flooded out. So this place would have been underwater. So that's why I'm wondering where we are with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's managed by the Environment Agency, but my understanding is that there are plans to install a new tidal barrier. Now, the one at the moment, the design life has been reduced because it's been operated, as you say, far more than expected. And it's also been used for, in kind of West London, there have been challenges with river flooding rather than tidal flooding. So it's been operated for that purpose as well. Far more frequently, which, as you say, uses up the design life of the asset. So the new one being planned, I'm not sure the exact details of when and where it will be, but it's certainly under consideration at the moment.
Thanks. And the final point is actually on page 32 of the pack, which is on at the end of section 2 of your report, it refers to the difficulty of Kensington sitting on, as it says here, historic Counters Creek catchment and impermeable surfaces.
Yeah.
Well, my question is, I thought we were sitting on clay.
So
isn't that permeable, sort of?
Yeah. So on top of the clay with all the tarmac and asphalt, when it rains, I mean, 1,000 years ago, that rainwater would have soaked into the ground and it would have really attenuated the flow. Whereas now it's goes into permeable roads and pavements and the patios that Alex talked about, and it rushes off and inundates the drains, the sewers, the gullies, the roads, which is really at the heart of the flooding issues, which is why we need to make London spongy again through sustainable drainage. And not only will that help with flooding, it'll also make cooling better as well with shading. It'll be a nicer place to live as well with sort of green streets. So yeah, SUDS is a really sort of fundamental part of the future. We can only go so far with great solutions to upgrade sewers and gullies.
So what is, sorry, then maybe to ask a specific question, what is then the Counters Creek catchment area? What's that, or is that?
Oh, so that's an area that covers, I think it's Kensington, Hammersmith and Westminster.
Yeah, it's a former lost river. So it used to be a river that then over time became canalised and then was then capped over and it became part of our drainage system. So Basingjet incorporated the former Counters Creek River into the foul sewer system. But what we refer to the Counters Creek is essentially the catchment of that drainage area. And unfortunately, that was the area that was badly affected by the 2021 summer flooding.
So is that like Westbourne, the Westbourne River that's disappeared? Thank you very much.
Well,
Thank you. Well, coming last, but most of my questions have been answered, so I just only have 2 questions. One of them is, one of the safeguardings is emptying into the sewage, but the sewage sometimes get overwhelmed. Do you have a plan B?
Well, you mean in terms of when it rains, the sewer being filled up with rainwater?
Yeah, because you also said in your presentation that to one of the safeguarding you use is emptying everything into the sewage.
Yeah.
So my question is, if the sewage is overwhelmed, do you have a plan B for emptying?
Yeah. So what happens? What happens is because the sewer system was designed back in the Victorian times for a population of about 2 million, it's designed to when it fills up with rainwater. And sorry, I should preface it by saying in some systems in the past, in other countries, you might have a separated system of rainwater and sewers. Where we've got a combined system, when it rains, it overwhelms the sewers and then floods out into the rivers.
Yeah.
Which is part of the environmental challenges we have. Now, in London, with the tideway tunnel, we've been able to alleviate that. But there are times when the rainfall is so intense that the speed at which it's overwhelmed means that we can't get it out quick enough, in which case it can back up into people's properties, but also prevent properties discharging into the sewers, which is why the non-return valves can protect individual properties and why we use the flips as well. So imagine most properties would be, say, at this level, and the sewer would be at this level, so they would drain by gravity. Whereas in situations where it's the other way around, we have to install a pump to take it from this level to this level. Yeah, there are times when the system is so blocked up so quickly with rainwater that it's just completely inundated. I mean, typically on a dry day, if you imagine a sewer, about 2% that would be filled with, say, sewage. When it rains, that entire pipe is filled up with water.
My second question is about water leaks.
Yeah.
And do you have a way of monitoring and assessing? Because sometimes I see a leak and it's there for over a week.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So what we have is we've a number of different ways to catch these. So one of them is by using detection teams that go out and try and find the leak. So they use things like it's genuinely like a pole they put to their ear and listen to the sound of it. We also have monitors that can detect where leakage is. Sometimes it's really difficult to find them. I mean, the example you raised is like what we call a visible leak. We also have a lot of underground leaks that aren't visible. So people reporting them as well on the website is really helpful. That then leads to a big list of leaks we need to get out and do. I think in North London we do about 40,000 repairs a year. But sometimes it's quite, it takes time to be able to get to do the leak. We might know about it on day one, but we might not be able to get there for several days because we might need to do some sort of isolation so that we can move water around the leak. And also get permissions as well. We've got to dig up the road and potentially cause traffic disruption. So particularly in areas where there's a busy junction or a lot of traffic, it takes time to get approvals to be able to go in and do the repair. But yeah, we've got huge investment to do more and more leak repairs to get better and better at the spotting.
Is there any intention to make assessing leaks and make it electronic, whereby, for instance, something get triggered if you have a leak to do something about it? Because it also adds a cost to the customers.
Definitely, yeah.
Because we pay for it. When you take 7 days to come and fix it, we're paying for it still.
Absolutely, yeah. It's what we're producing is kind of like world class quality that takes time and effort to produce, and then the last thing we want to do is lose it. As you said, and you're absolutely right. So the customer money. So the technology is getting better and better, but the network is so vast. It's very difficult because the leaks are often the ones that you see on the surface are often very small. So being able to detect that is really complicated. And we have a lot of things like increased monitoring, particularly with all the smart meters we're installing now. So a lot of properties can use as much water as they want without, pay a flat rate. Whereas we're installing smart meters now, and with all these smart meters, we can then know more precisely what the usage is, and therefore we know how much we're pumping into an area and how much is being used by our customers. So if there's discrepancy, we know it's leakage, and we know to then target those areas. But yeah, the last thing we want is leakage as well, and the last thing we want to do is it's such a waste. So, the technology is very difficult to pinpoint it, but we're investing more and more to get better at it, and the leakage is coming down.
Thank you. Sorry, and just one question to our guys, to council officers. Now, I mean, you're aware of all the problems of flooding. And one of the ways to mitigate it is to actually, when you allow planning permissions, to be mindful of people who want to extend into gardens, because gardens are not just for enjoyment, they do have a function with the flooding. So is that something we're going to take forward and be a little bit more aggressive about having all those extra extensions covering up lovely gardens and green spaces?
Yeah,
local government comments.
One thing that obviously we do try and encourage residents as much as possible is to have as little hard servicing as we can. We do have a challenge there though, because you don't normally require planning permission for hard servicing. So we will, where we can, try and provide permeable services. Obviously, a that's actually granted permission will have its own drainage. We normally have a condition to make sure that surface runoff is not increased by any extension. So in theory, it shouldn't be exacerbating the situation. I think the challenge has always been, if you go back sort of 30, 40 years, people now, perhaps not so much in this borough because we're slightly different typology of townscape, but clearly I think we've all seen that most front gardens have now gone to hard surfacing, and clearly that has increased cumulatively the rate of surface runoff, and that's something that I'm sure everybody finds challenging. But at the moment, it's getting that balance between allowing people to obviously park when they want to park, but then actually trying to deal with the drainage of that as well. Although we do have some control over the frontage.
Thanks very much. So I've got three questions I'm going to ask. So in your introduction, you said you had increased numbers of tankers and teams. So how many did you start with, and how many have you got now?
That's a really good question. I can find out. I know we spent about 10 million on additional tankers and teams. I think it might be about somewhere in the region 20-30, but I'll come back to that if that's okay. Yeah.
You perhaps have an answer of how many, what the increase is from, and so that would be really helpful, please, to give us some assurance that are addressing that. My other two questions, the council paper in paragraphs 5.34 and 5.35 is the set me up for those. And we had the previous select committee flood risk working group in the direct aftermath of 2021. And a number of recommendations which were absorbed into the local flood risk management strategy. And Thames Water commented on those recommendations. So I will read the question out from here so members of the public know what we're talking about. So recommendation 5 originally stated Thames Water to further review with independent experts the cause of the sudden decrease in flood water on the 12th of July 2021, as reported by residents, around the time that the Lots Road pumping station was turned on, and to share the findings with the local communities and the council. The Thames Water responded that he commissioned a study and would share your findings when that study reports. So has the study reported, and have we seen the outcome?
Yes, so the study was we included in the final stages of the integrated, independent water flooding assessment, which was published as part of the stage 4 report. So we asked them to look at, had Councillors Creek been present and would it have alleviated the flooding at all? And were there any issues associated with the community perspective that the flood level suddenly dropped? They looked into that, and what they found was that the Lots Road pumping station was initiated as soon as the water was deep enough for the pumps to operate, and all pumps operated within the design parameters for the period of until the water dropped again to the level it should have, where the pumps were then turned off. So that was part of the independent flood study.
So the fact that I remember the public meeting in the council chamber where that I think many residents graphically described how there was a sudden diminishment of the water level, and that's actually happened. You found that was correct.
Well, no, we didn't dispute what people saw. What we sought to explain was, did the Lots Road pumping station operate according to its design and the parameters it was set to? My suspicion is that the rain had stopped and the pumps could finally draw down against a fixed level of water rather than continually filling up by the rainstorm carrying on.
James, is this something the council is familiar with?
Yeah, I think
that's described.
I mean, so this recommendation was after the London Flood Review had been published. So I think it was even after the London Flood Review had been published, concerns were raised to the committee during the working group stage. I think it was a little bit less about questioning about the timing of the pumping station, but more about understanding the cause of the sudden drop and looking potentially at the levels in the local area during that window, and potentially the modelling. So I think it was, in terms of time frame, this was after that big knowledge. So I think it was asking for kind of something additional. I think in the response it was that something else would be looked into, after that report, because this was, I think it was a whole year after the London flood.
Let me check on that. I remember work being commissioned on it. I might have got my reports mixed up. Let me check and come back to Chair. That's okay.
Yeah, if you would please, sort of take a note of that. So I'll just move on to my final question, paragraph 5.35, where the recommendation 6, as it was at the time, said Thames Water to complete the modernisation and improvement of the Lots Road pumping station at pace and ahead of the scheduled time frame of 2030. And at the time, Thames Water recommended a replacement set of wording, which is Thames Water to complete the electrical upgrade of Lots Road pumping station by 2025. Now, in your paper tonight, section 2 of your paper tonight talks about electrification in 2031. So what's changed?
So there's two parts to it. So one is around getting the power upgrades to the site, which we have to go through UK Power Networks to do. And there's quite a significant backlog around the country, so we find it can take a long time to do that. The second part is around us being able to replace the existing diesel pumps, which are manually run, with the electrified ones. Now, each of the pumps has to be removed individually because we can't take them all out, as it would mean that we couldn't pump sewage. So we have to do it pump by pump. And each one of them has to be bespokely made as well. Plus the building is listed as well. So it's a very space constrained environment and needs a tailor-made pump, which has incredibly long lead times, design times, and complexity there. So at the moment, the current forecast is 2031 to complete that work, but we're seeing what we can be done to deliver quicker. That is subject, I should say, to some of the financial situation at the moment, where we've got a discussion with potential investors as well about finance the business, but the current plan is 2031.
So how confident are you about 2031? It sounds like there's quite a lot of caveats there.
Well, the pumps have been ordered, so I would say we're pretty confident on that front, because the pumps have been ordered, the electrification's in, the control panels processes have been worked. At this stage, I would say there's no blockers to that timeline. As Ian said, we don't think we're going to be able to accelerate it much more than that because of the limitations of trying to get those pumps in, ensuring the system works, getting it all commissioned, so we have confidence that we have a robust system. But if there's anything to counter that, we will keep you informed. But certainly having spoken to the project director last week on it, there was nothing that he indicated that would show that date was at risk.
And in terms of the council, I think we were sort of thinking 2035 based on the previous report, but when did we hear about the date being 2030? When was this news tonight, or was this in this paper, or was this something we were aware of for a while ago?
I don't think I've been aware of the latest, so it's useful to have the update of the timeframes. I know when some of it was dependent on the change from the AMP7 to AMP8, which is the financial programme that water companies act under, which changed in April. So a lot of it was kind of waiting until after April and then seeing what in the business plan. So so I think I hadn't had that updated the 2031 census.
Thanks very much. I'm going to Joanna Gardner, caught my eye. The councillor's not on the committee. So Joanna, you're first, and then
thank you. I was a member of the working group, the flood working group. So actually, I'm quite interested in the Lots Road pumping element, because as I recall, the challenge and challenge in the report was the manual turning on, that there was a delay in the manual turning on. I don't know. I think we went away asking for you to come back on that, and I don't recall seeing it, but I appreciate I'm not a member of the committee. So it would be good if we would still have that clarification through James, please, and through you, Chair. My specific questions were your SUDS innovation scheme, where you're talking about working with utility companies. Can you not actually move it to the utility company automatically provide some SUDS systems? Because otherwise I'm listening to this thinking, are you going to come along on a case-by-case basis? And if so, is the hole in the road going to be open no longer, twice or three times as long because you're working with a solution after the hole's been dug, or indeed on a case-by-case basis, so the actual problem doesn't get sorted until it's extreme? Shall I let them answer that one? Come back to it.
Yes, that's
Okay, so at the moment, the proposal is, we're at concept stage here, is that 165,000 holes are dug by utility companies in London every year to undertake planned maintenance works of their network. So this is gas, electricity, water, data, etc. Now, we were looking at how do we increase the level of SUDS delivery, because at the moment it's pretty patchy, it's pretty slow, it tends to be fairly reactive. So we thought, well, if the main challenge to delivering SUDS is A, the cost of digging a hole, and B, getting permission to dig a hole, and yet we've got 165,000 holes being dug, how could we get some of those holes refilled with SUDS, particularly in areas where we know that they are upstream of high-risk flood areas? So what we did was we being ourselves in the GLA, secured some funding from Ofwat to take what seemed like an idea and try and road test it. So we got various consultants in to try and support us, and we think that there is a really good opportunity to do this. But what you need is an independent market operator who can effectively act as a speed data. So someone who will say, I'm a utility company digging a hole. How much would you pay me to put that hole back in as a SUD? Being matched with a local authority or Thames Water saying, we'd like the SUD there, please. So what we're looking at is how would you create that independent process where you have robust, transparent, independent market operator who is using this system to drive up the number of SUDs that are created where they are appropriate. Now, many of those 165,000 locations will not be appropriate. They're in the middle of a red route, or they're in the middle of a cherished, parking zone. But quite a few of those could be really good opportunities for SUDs. And the work we've done suggests that you could deliver them for about 25% cheaper than the normal rate. And the process by we were looking at would also look by scaling up delivery and standardizing some of the ways you do SUDs. So at the moment, every SUD is almost bespokely designed. And sometimes a third of the budget goes on the design element rather than on installation. So if you can have a standard design that says for your average parking space, 2 meters by 5 meters, you could have a standard rain garden, and we know exactly the benefit of that rain garden, and we'd be able to know the cost parameters. We could then create a really scalable approach to it. So we're now going back to Ofwat to say, can we have some more money to set this market up and trial it in the 2 priority catchments, of which RBKC is in one of them, so we can actually test this at scale to see does it work. Now, we've talked to Ofwat about it. They're enormously excited about it. We've talked to Bloomberg, who support a lot of cities in adapting, and they think it's world-class genius. So I'm not going to cook all my eggs and count them yet, but I'm excited by the potential of it, and I will keep you posted.
Can I ask actually a question for our lead member? We certainly in our ward, we've had a raised table put in recently with a crossing across it, and there's a proposal for another one. I'm looking at this going, how is that fitting the sort of SUDS briefing, or indeed not actually creating a barrier to surface water? And what are we doing? We're thinking, how can we be part of this process?
I think we look at things like raised tables in the context of it's not just a flooding decision, it's also looking at road safety and how we can best kind of balance those competing priorities. So that's something that we do on a case-by-case basis. Highways officers look at it well.
Can we make them more sustainable? Can we put drains in them? Can we think about, is there a different way we could achieve the same effect, but to be more rainwater resistance as opposed to a raised table where actually lots of the water will either stay on one side or the other, just by
I mean, I would take advice from officers on whether that can be achieved. Obviously, the purpose of introducing raised tables is kind of to assist with traffic calming. So if there's a way that we can calm traffic that is still deliverable, is still feasible within the budgets of the set, etc., and you can manage this better, then yeah, I mean, I'd be happy to do that. So I don't know whether at a technical level you have any advice.
I mean, there have been examples of raised tables where I've been in discussion with highways officers about drainage and how it may function. I think as Councillor City said, sometimes it's about road safety. So if other traffic calming measures can't be put in, so if the crossing needs to be flush with the curbs, you may need to raise it. Whereas if there are other interventions that could go in, sometimes they are looked at. So tree pits and build outs or things like that. There may be circumstances where other interventions may be looked at.
James, are you always in touch with highways department on the proposing of raised table? Is it part of their normal procedure to consult you on it? Because we've got quite a lot of these since we've gone in. And
No, because highway drainage is the responsibility of the highway authority. So they have a lot of experience within the highways authority in terms of runoff gullies. So it's more where there's, it may be in a location where there has been flooding in the past or those kinds of circumstances. So I probably wouldn't have the capacity to look at every single highways intervention that goes in. And as I said, a lot of it is kind of dealt with within the highways authority. But we have, reasonably frequent meetings and discussions to talk through.
One last question. Councillor Idris raised the question about sewers, and when the sewers are full, it goes into the river. I know my daughter works in the summer for a sailing and canoeing on the Thames, and the minute it rains, they will get pulled off the water. That's it, because of the sewer. What are the long-term plannings that this doesn't become the default mechanism when the sewers flood, when capacity is reached?
Yeah, so I'm a sailor as well. A lot of people in Thames are, sailors or wild swimmers. Who really sort of connect to that purpose. I think what part of London is she sailing?
Just down Pimlico.
Pimlico. Okay, so we have got the connections to Tideway Tunnel there now. So now when it rains,
So she'll sail when the lake. It's not just Pimlico. They'll sail down to Hammersmith and
yes.
so the other way. Yeah.
So both at Hammersmith and at
Down to-
Pimlico,
yeah.
there are combined sewer outfalls at those locations and pumping stations at Hammersmith, which in the past before Tideway Tunnel would pump into the River Thames when there was a downpour. Now it goes into the Thames Tideway Tunnel, and there are still extreme occasions where the rainfall is so intense that the tunnel itself can't handle the flow. But those number of occasions are vastly fewer now. So the number of occasions that should be affected will be way less. But we need to continue to invest going forward, and a lot of that is related to the sustainable drainage to prevent the water getting into the sewers in the first place.
So 95% reduction in the frequency of combined sewer overflows into the Thames because of the Tideway Tunnel. Where those 5% where it still does happen, the tunnel will have collected the worst bit of the pollution. So if you imagine you have those sort of 2 weeks of very hot weather in the summer, and then we have that very convective storm that then washes everything into the Thames, the tunnel will collect what's called the first flush, so the most toxic bit of it. So we do estimate there will be a very, very significant improvement in the water quality in the tidal Thames.
It'd be interesting if the committee could see those figures. Thank you.
That's right. So we've got one other councillor who's not on the committee first, then I'll go to the public as residents, and I'll go from my right because for my eye.
Thank you. Earls Court Ward councillors have been looking at the exhibition centre and the demands of water and sewage on the plans, and we're just told, well, Thames Water are doing that. Now, we know that you've done you did one intervention in Old Brompton Road, and I think you've found another one. But it was very unclear when we visited the site office earlier this week as to precisely how that estate, that 42-acre estate, is actually going to have sufficient water. I mean, make it future-proof without issues affecting residents in the adjacent area, where we already have problems of low water pressure or no water. So I understand the development doesn't have to remedy an existing problem, but we would seek that Thames Water did remedy the problem, which is the one I'm going to come back to Alex with the specific addresses. But it is a concern when there is a vast development and we still do not have sufficient detail about how much water. I know there are 1,048 documents for us to go through, but we do need clarity. We need it in a form that residents can actually understand.
Absolutely. So perhaps we'll talk about it in terms of the sewage side, the water and the runoff.
Because of this area is subject to sewage flooding, not surface flooding.
Absolutely, yeah. So on the sewage front, when we work closely with the local planning authorities, we're a non-statutory consultee when there is new developments like the Earls Court one. But in those occasions, we would see, the number of properties, the expected number of flow, and the loads of the sewage that would be coming from that development. And then we would upgrade our sewers and potentially our sewage treatment works to ensure that we can handle that. Now, as Alex mentioned earlier, there may be occasions where we feel the need to delay occupancy of those properties to give us time to upgrade our sewers. Now, as I say, it's a non-statutory consultee on that. So these Grampians, we might say, we can build the development, but wait a certain number of years, potentially 3 years before they're occupied, and that gives us the time to do the investment. On the water side, it's a similar process, and in some cases, if it's particularly tall building, the developer might install pumps to help with water pressure. But London is thankfully served by a ring main that can bring in water from lots of different water treatment works.
Excuse me,
sorry,
the issue is that we already have an issue of low water pressure and sometimes no water. And I'm just concerned that the plans seem rather vague as to how they're going to be implemented. And therefore, effectively, we might install a system that's apparently compatible. Populations may change, especially with, I think the mayor's announced different changes today. So is future-proofing, how much is the percentage on the future-proofing in order to be able to adapt to the flex? But also, what is the consideration for residents that are already experiencing a problem?
Absolutely. So with the customers already experiencing problems, there can be several reasons for that. And it depends on the cause, which then relates to the solution. So if, for instance, they're in a high-rise building, that could be related to the pumps, for instance.
No. This is about 25 addresses almost in a spine.
Yeah.
So there's clearly, it's not just, and there are different types of buildings.
Oh, I see.
And different types of occupancy. So I'm saying, and it's a long-standing problem which hasn't been addressed.
I mean, for that specific case, if you want, we could take away the details after.
It's just they're very close to the development.
That might be something that maybe you can exchange email addresses after.
Yes.
So deal with that offline, as you suggest.
I mean, so just to build on Ian's point, so when we get a major new development coming forward, we would be in discussions with the developer quite early stage, looking at, is there enough capacity in the network to support that development, both foul drainage and potable water supply, we would run their development in our models to look at, do we need an upgrade? What size of upgrade would be required and how extensive does the upgrade need to be? And we then enter into discussions with what balance of the costs of that upgrade fall on that developer and what need to be absorbed as part of our sort of wider costs in maintaining the system. But certainly for something as significant as Earls Court redevelopment, we would have been in long-standing discussions with the developer there about the necessary upgrades.
And does that include future proofing with
We would be looking at all phases of the development. We'd be looking at, does one phase not trigger an upgrade, but when would successive phases require that upgrade to come in? What's the lead-in time we need to have that upgrade delivered in? And it's only by exception we would then apply that granting condition if we couldn't deliver it in time. But again, it would come back to that three-way discussion between the developer, the planning authority, and ourselves to make sure that we can make that as sustainable as possible.
I would like to see something that actually, just even if it was a diagram, which would make it easier for residents to understand, because they can't understand the documentation that's been submitted.
Okay, take that one offline. Thanks very much, Lynn. So with the residents, I'm going to go from this side that way. Supply, you caught my eye first, so you go first, and then we'll just go.
Supply Lambert from the Ladbroke Association. To pull on a point made by Councillor Idris, it's very fashionable now to pave over one's gardens, both back and front, often in sandstone embedded in concrete. As John Ways pointed out, the council has not much control over this. Most of it's allowed, unless there's any development, most of it's allowed by permitted development. Now, I've read somewhere that really a huge percentage of London is private gardens. How big a problem does Thames Water think this is? And have you thought of lobbying the government to give the greater control to local authorities?
It's a huge problem. I don't know if you saw the RHS report earlier in the week that said that 42% of UK gardens are paved over. So it's horrifying. And combined with climate change, it's an near impossible target for us to run at. So as many suds as we're installing, people eating away at front garden parking, etc. So unfortunately we hold no sort of power on that. We are looking at, in the longer term, could we charge people for drainage based upon their impermeable area rather than just solely on their potable water use? But we'd be very keen to work with anyone who could find a way to prevent this sort of what's called urban creep. Certainly we have been talking to our customers about it because it's looking at, could we offer them rainwater butts to offset if there is necessary hard standing going in? Could it be offset by a rainwater butt on the front and back of the property? We've been working with various boroughs to look at, could we offer a depaving scheme? So if enough residents on the street wish to depave, what could we do to support that? Could we subsidise a skip? Could we provide materials, etc.? And various boroughs have expressed support for that idea. But ultimately, it's not something that we have any power over, but it is something of major concern to us.
Yes, but the best solution would be to planning power, so that people would need to seek planning permission for paving over more than a certain percentage of their gardens. And there is a rule for front gardens, which allows a tiny little strip of planting around the edge, but it's useless. So really, it comes back to lobbying the government to tweak the planning system.
Yeah, I'd be very interested to hear what the planners have to say about that. But
I know John never likes me suggesting change.
No. It has been raised on numerous occasions, but it's a cumulative impact. I've got to feel, unfortunately, it's a bit like closing the stable after the horse has long bolted. Given the amount of hard surfacing that's existing, but there's no appetite. I mean, I think it comes back, unfortunately, to this constant balance between how far do you prevent people from doing what they wish to do on their own property, and trying to get that balance. As you said, 5 square metre, over 5 square metres does require a permeable surface.
Front
planning
gardens
permission.
only.
Yes, front garden only. I don't think there's any appetite for that. I don't think that's going to change.
Trying to create, I mean, really, paving's not a really big deal, especially as you can have permeable.
I totally agree. So, you know, in terms of guidance or other things that we will issue to residents, we will always encourage them to use permeable paving, permeable surfacing. And obviously, you know, with regard to, I don't want to talk about basements, but in that case, we did make sure that there was a garden was provided and that there was permeable drainage. So where we do have control, we will try to
You do as much as you can.
Yes.
We need an Article 4 direction with areas where it's a problem.
Thanks very much for that. So let's move on to Lady in Grey, Tom.
I chair the Pembroke Association and the Portfolio. And it's another planning one, really. I think the council does a pretty good job at scrutinising major applications. And now we see significant SUDs and other recommendations. And James here is extremely active in that. We're very grateful. There is a grey area here. And this relates to something that Alex Nixon was saying, where we're not really sure of the cost benefit of some offset measures. And so the research project you're referring to would be really welcome. But we're seeing things like the council is saying in some streetscapes, for example, it will put in planters. Now there's a difference, I suspect, between best in class planters that have a reservoir or that even rain cycle. So the water that's stored, the rainwater that's stored in those planters is then the source of hydrating the planter, and just a bog standard planter that when it rains, it flourishes, when it's dry, it dies. And I think there is a need across council planning for much more training and awareness about best-in-class solutions. And it's not just permeable surface, it's a whole range of things. It's also, are we absolutely convinced our colleagues in highways are using the most up-to-date data in assessing infrastructure changes and how they channel floods? I'm very aware that a lot of the Section 19 reports that other boroughs produced after the 21 floods made specific recommendations about unusual flows and trajectories of water. This was also through Fellow. And they raised the question how far these highway infrastructure changes have led to increased flows. They've sped flows, they've directed flows in different directions. So it's a question about how we can prove the cost benefit of interventions such that they become budget priorities. It's also a question about making sure that all the officers in the council think flood first in the broad flood areas, because it's not a great solution for residents to hear, this won't make the situation worse. We want things that we can quantify and say, this will make the situation better.
Well, thank you very much for that question. I think let's see what the council have got to say in response. So I'll start with the lead member and then perhaps planning as well, John. And then we'll carry on around the room in a moment. So
yeah, I mean, I think these are really well made points. But of course, we should try to make our areas more flood resilient and mitigate flood risk where we can on the big schemes. So yeah, the basic level, I agree with a lot of what you said.
I mean, I see a huge variation between individual officers' pre-application responses to applications. Some of them get it, some of them really don't. We always respond as a Pembroke Association in our area where we think more could be done. But there's a difference between something being a necessity and something being something which officers gently educate residents to do. You could put a water buck here. It's taking it to the next level of thinking, which will make the critical difference.
So Thanks for making the point, which is on record. Let me just see if officers from the council have anything else to add, and I want to go on to other questions.
Well, certainly with regard to streetscape proposals, we are really working quite closely with our colleagues. I've worked for the council for a long time, as you probably know, and I've certainly seen a sea change in the way that we work. So I'd say, you know, in the last few years, particularly a lot of merit for James, we do work very closely with them. So Sudsley's looked at incredibly closely on our townscape projects. I think we have looked at in the past, we've looked at the cumulative impact of small development, and I think that's what you're referring to. You're probably right, we probably should. I mean, every so often we do have presentations to our officers. It's quite difficult sometimes because, you know, sometimes we have churn staff, particularly in development management, and that doesn't make life easier. But we do what we can do. But you're right, there's always grounds for educating officers, and I'm sure you're probably right that some perhaps are better than others. James certainly looks at most of the applications he can do, and we will encourage people to do it. But I think I come back to that point, we can't make people do some of these things. So it is a case of encouraging them. And clearly when you're under pressure doing determining a planning application in a certain time, it's not necessarily our role to go out and say, well, have you thought of doing this, this, and this as well? So, but I take the point. It's well made, and I think, you know, there's always more that we could do.
James, yeah, just quickly, I would say that since the local plan was adopted last year, I've noticed an increase in the quality of the submissions that are coming forward, where particularly this is for even small development applications, people are proposing more sustainable solutions, whereas previously, in the previous local plan, lots of properties were just digging a big hole and putting a big attenuation tank that didn't do any of the wider benefits. So I think the policies now in the local plan are making some of those more sustainable approaches come through. So things like green roofs being proposed and report services being proposed by default rather than having to be persuaded and through that. But I think you're right. I think there's I think there will be more to do, and it will be educating the agents and the consultants for those planning applications coming forward to know what they need to do to get permission.
Thanks very much. While we were in answering that question, Councillor Idris whispered her apologies into my ear. She's got a train to catch, but I am prepared to go on for another half an hour or so to give everybody a chance on the residents' benches. And I don't want to keep our guests too long, but so there's a gentleman with a black jacket at the back which says flood on it. No questions there. It seems to say flood on it. I don't know what that is. National.
Yes, I'm with the National Flood Forum now to support the local election group.
Very good. Thanks very much for coming along. So in the green jacket there.
I've been living at the bottom of Stratford Road and Abingdon Road and Allen Street, and my insurance went up 40% this year because of flooding. What has alerted them to? What has changed in the last 30 years to alert them to this factor?
In Stratford Road. So do we have any observations from the council or Thames Water on?
I mean, have you redesignated areas or something for the insurance companies?
No, so insurers, they have two main sources of information that insurers use. One is they have their own model information, so where they think properties are at risk of flooding, and each insurer may have a different type of model.
So change insurers is your advice.
Changing insurers is the advice that the council's been given from the government organisation who deals with flood insurance. Is shopping around for insurance may lead you to have lower premiums because of the model information those insurers use. So maybe that your property is.
But I have the same insurance company. Why have they suddenly put on this? So 40%.
So they could use a different product. The other thing that insurers have are claims information from local areas. So it may be that, that there are more insurance claims in a certain area. The council doesn't have any of that claims information, so we're not aware of the properties who claimed insurance but didn't report flooding.
There was a flood in Stratford Road.
There was a
it was 10 years ago or more.
I mean, in the area around Stratford Road, kind of in the wider area, I'm aware of properties that were affected by flooding.
The shops, particularly with their basements at the bottom.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I don't know specifically, but those, so either an increase in insurance claims data, or a change in the model information from the insurer, may cause that increase. I mean, it is an issue across central London, across the country. There's one thing that we gave advice on. There's more information on our website. So certain types of properties can get affordable flood insurance through a government scheme, but it depends on the type of property. So it has to be a building that has fewer than 3 subdivided flats. If you're in one of those, then through certain insurers, and there's a list on the website, I can give you information on this. You can go through those insurers, and those insurance policies are backed up by central government. But unfortunately,
that's something we'll take offline. It's getting a bit particular now, so I think we'll take that offline and perhaps have a chat at the end of the meeting about Stratford Road. And you have my
permeable pavements, slabs that you're talking about. I didn't know you could have permeable concrete. So they've just done Abingdon Road last year. Are those slabs permeable?
Are they? Do we know? I don't think we've got the pavements here tonight. So
no, most pavements in the borough are not.
Would that be a good idea?
Yeah. So so as part of the Portobello Road scheme, we're trialing some permeable surfacing, some permeable parking bays. We have other examples of permeable surfacing. So Arundel Gardens, the whole of the road was constructed as a permeable tarmac, so it looks like tarmac, but it allows water through. So there are things that we are looking at. We are trialing across the country.
Thanks very much indeed. I'm going to move on to the lady in the blue top now, please. All right, and we'll now we've got a lady in the left row. I don't know if you've got any questions. So the gentleman in the No, okay, so
You'll comment from me. A very specific question. I'm here to represent a small community that lived just off Lancaster Road behind the Methodist church that was seriously flooded back in 21. And I think 2 years ago, a valve was the road between, on the junction of Lancaster Road and Silchester was dug up, and a valve of some sort was put in there. Is there any evidence at all that these valves have made a difference to potential flooding in that area? I mean, people just wondered why it was there and whether it has made a difference.
I'm not sure of the specifics, but we can get back to you once we've had a look at it if you want. I mean, I imagine if it was a valve, it would be a non-return valve.
I'm sure it was.
Yeah. So not too sure of the details, but yeah, we can find out and get back to you.
Okay.
Any more from the public? Anyone wants a second bite? No, Dora, you have a supplementary question.
All right, thank you very much. It's related to the big investments that you have to make, given the, let's say, the financially wrong reasons that Thames Water is in the press and the financial pressures. What assurances do we have that all these investments will be carried out, the tunnel will be completed, the pumping and all that? You know, you've got long timescales here.
Yes, really good question. So you're absolutely right. The investments we talk about are caveated by the financial situation and the need to find investors. Now, a lot of what we have in our plans are statutory legal requirements from either Ofwat or the EA. And there's not only that, but there's also incentives to complete work, and also there's penalties for not completing it. So we've got a plan at the moment which we're confident about and deliberate about. terms of timescales, what can be done in the timescales as well. And the investment has massively increased. So, you know, we're investing more now than we have done in the last, you know, this is the biggest upgrade we've done in like 150 years. We were spending about £1 billion a year. The last 5 years, now it's 2 billion a year. It's going to be 3 billion a year in 2030. Well, that's certainly what we intend. But you're right, it is caveated by the financial situation at the moment. Now there is a bid by London and Valley Water at the moment, which they're working on with the government to secure funding and have a market-led solution. But if that's not successful, we'll have to go down the SAR route, which is essentially a temporary situation until a market-led solution can be found.
Thanks. What I was reading in the paper the other day didn't look good at all in terms of potential buyers of Thames Water.
Doubt if the employees of Thames Water could comment on that.
No, of course not. But the point is the
really
investment, the chance, the investment to do what they supposed to be doing.
I think so. Some of you, right? So for instance, some of them are already underway to the point where it'd be cost prohibitive. So for instance, Alex is talking about having us already all the pumps for Lots Road. You know, we've already done the electrical installation work as well. So if there was to be any trimming plan, let's say, then it would be done on a risk basis. It would be with consideration of all of the, you know, legislations that commitments we've already made, and also the work that's already taken place so far. So yeah, I feel hopeful things like Lots Road and some things we've talked about. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Just 2 or 3 points of detail I wanted to go through in the council paper before we close, just because I don't believe these stones are third. On the recommendations, page 14, you've got FRC 11 and FRC 14 in the both coded as amber. James, I wonder if you could say a bit more about those so that you can give us some assurance that they're both on a path to being green.
Yeah, so 11 is around property flood resilience for residents. So we have funding secured from the Environment Agency to deliver that. It was tied up a little bit with the non-return value installation from Thames Water, just in terms of not wanting to duplicate flood protection works at the same time. So it made sense to almost wait until the Thames Water had completed their installations to then move on to protecting properties. So this is where properties were affected by surface water as well. So it may be installing flood doors, flood barriers to properties. We are proposing to use the Environment Agency's framework. So they have a framework for surveys and installation. So that will simplify delivery. So at the moment we're just getting access to that framework, and then we have the funding secured. So it's then just targeting delivery.
The other one I was interested, I won't go through all the ambers, but the FRC 14,
yes.
Flood wards.
Yeah,
that sounds like a good initiative. Have we got some flood wards identified? And
yeah, so I mean, part of it is wanting to almost align it with the development of the community flood action plan from the flood action group, and then supporting them in the delivery of those flood wardens. So one of the steps of the flood action group, one of their actions is having a community flood plan, and as part of that there'll be training for flood wardens. So I think it's just that we originally said we'll have it by 2024, but it made more sense to have the involvement of the flood action group than build organically and not just do training for training's sake. So, but we have I've already linked the flood action group with our resilience team, and in our multi-agency flood plan, which is another action, we've allowed in there for there to be community flood plans. So there's better links between the council and the community in terms of actual on the ground responding to flooding.
Very much. Just moving on to page 18 and AP10, just talks about service across the Countess Creek catchment area. Now, we did talk about that earlier. I just wonder, is there anything more that we need to say about that? Number one, I'll start with you, James, and I'll see if Council Bradley.
Yeah, I think part of that is there are a number of different kind of schemes and projects going on and funds that are available to deliver SUDs. So the council has a secured funding from Thames Water, which secured funding from others. But that action specifically is more about targeting SUDs. The amount of SUDs that Thames Water have identified that need to be delivered within the Countess Creek catchment is substantial with the number of properties at risk of sewer flooding. So that it was intentionally a separate action there to make sure that there's that targeted, almost proactive identification of where such almost should be located from Thames Water's perspective, rather than opportunistic from the council saying we could do something here. So I think part of that is I indicated there, part of it may come out through the Central London Partnership, but there's probably a bit more of a need, and this has been communicated with Thames Water, a bit more of a need for proactive identification of where such kind of should be located from Thames Water's perspective. Because basically there are constraints with the existing infrastructure, and Thames Water have more of the information in terms of where would be best to locate it and prioritise it. Intentionally, we've included the wider Countess Creek catchment because we're aware it's not just us, so it's not necessarily a local.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, it's just got three parts. One is the, building James' point, is the sort of co-funding of the SUDS opportunity modelling, which is also kind of at that London level as well, to identify where the best locations would be, with a series of kind of layers of modelling to consider. There's also some of the SUDS projects we funded, such as the Alan Barlow estate, and then the next opportunity is the collaboration co-funding as well. So I think we've had two bids from I think we had two bids from yourselves, and there'll be further opportunities to support funding in the future as well.
Yeah, there was one bid from our housing management service and one bid from Opportunity Kensington. Right, who developed one, but they're both in the borough.
Yeah, it's good.
Thanks. Page 25, MR1 and MR2. I'm just interested in what are these, what is this tracking equipment? So garbage sensors and ground truth monitoring equipment. One of them's amber, the other one's green. I'm just not sure what that is, James. That's my thinking is, have we got enough of them? Where are they?
Yeah, so
getting.
Yeah, so one of the points that came out of the review of July 2021 is understanding how water moves through the system, goes from the gully network into the sewer network and kind of tracks through. So one thing we identified was, in terms of the highway gully network, we didn't have any active monitoring other than visiting the number of times that they've been done. So we've installed a number of sensors into individual highway gullies, and what that does is it looks at the water level below it. It sits just under the cover, looks at the water level, so you can see during a rainfall event the water's the water levels going up and down, and
somebody actively monitoring that somewhere during a rainfall event, a major rainfall event.
The system is looking is automatically looking all the time. So during rainfall events, I've logged in and looked at what's been happening, because it's a pilot at the moment. So what we haven't done is deployed it many more locations and done targeted, bespoke, reactive cleansing on the basis of the information. At the moment, they've only been in since February, and most of that time it didn't rain, which is always the case. You put monsters in and it doesn't rain. But now that we've had some rainfall events coming through, some in July, some in September, and some recently, we'll be able to look at how useful that information is. Other boroughs have deployed these, and it's giving some information, also some confidence for residents that some information is being collected that could be looked at, could be used, and feeds into things. So the locations of those we consulted with the flood action group within within that area about recommended locations. Some of them were tweaked.
So are they in the high risk locations?
They're in the high risk locations, but they're spread, even the number that we've installed, they're spread across the borough, but in the highest priority locations.
Okay, I mean, a lot of what you've talked about, James, has been, you're the experts on flooding, but there's a lot of cross-department activity. We've heard about the highways department a lot. I mean, what sort of support do you think you need from across the council on this? So housing, planning, highways?
Yeah, I work really closely with lots of teams in other services, and it was really good with the recent funding round from Thames Water that I wasn't the one that had to fill out all the application forms and get everything sorted. That housing management on themselves develop that application and other partners as well. So I've got there are projects that are in our parks, in our schools, in our housing estates, in the highway. They're all contributing to managing surface water and flood risk. And I think with the London Surface Water Strategy and the Central London Partnership, it's about finding ways of scaling that up that doesn't draw too much on individual council resources, particularly for the cross-borough delivery.
Thanks very much. So in summing up, I'm going to say thanks very much to everybody who's been on the panel from Thames Water and Council tonight for giving evidence. This committee does have a statutory duty to scrutinise flooding periodically, so we will do an exercise like this again in the future. Thames Water, thank you very much for undertaking to give us to come back to us. I wrote down 3 things, but I think there might have been more than that. There was the sewer depth monitors, the number of tankers and teams, the clarification on the reports on the turning on of the Lots Road pumping station. I think there might have been more.
There was one more, Chair, which was to do with the manual operation of the Lots Road pumpers as well.
Yeah, so it was 4. 4, yeah, I thought there was 4. I know I didn't I missed one while I was writing that. But we're very grateful in anticipation for getting the answers to those. But could I say thank you for coming along again? Also, thank you to our residents for coming along and asking lots of questions tonight. It's really helpful in a committee, and to councillors who are not members of the committee also for coming along. So thanks very much, and to my remaining colleagues. So we're one ecology and one else. But we're still quorum. So thanks very much, everybody, for all this evening. And I'll close the meeting there. Wish you all good night and safe.
Thank you very much. Question about the addendum report when that comes out. Yeah, look at that and see if you want to do anything with it.
Yeah, I think we'll also look at that. Yeah, thank you. Yes, it was